Joining online? All right. Good morning, everybody. We are doing Daf Samech Beis, and today is very much a tale of kind of two amudim in the sense that we're finishing the parak, and we're finishing kind of this weeks-long digression. So the Masechta started off with talking about Gittin, which of course made sense, and then we started talking about certain things that were done with Neitikun Olam, specifically in the context of Shlichus with Get, and that kind of morphed into a very long and detailed digression about various takanos that were made, and that concluded with the Mishnah. The last Mishnah of this whole digression was yesterday, where we talked about various takanos that were made, not necessarily Neitikun Olam, because of Darkei Shalom. So again, obviously very similar. And what we were talking about yesterday was how to interact with, neighbors or whatever it is, people that might not be as careful as we'd like when it comes to various halachos with Shvius, with Tumah V'Tara, with Trumas and Maestros, and like that. And that's kind of where we're going to pick up today. The specific case that we're going to be talking about today, maybe we'll just say it outside and then we'll jump in, is what do you do if a friend comes over to you? He's an Amma Aris, he's someone that can't necessarily be trusted when it comes to Tumah V'Tara, let's say, and he's got a whole thing of dough, and he would like you to help him with challah. So can you help him separate challah or not? So again, we're starting three lines from the top. Last word on the line is Heid. So Heid of Yossi ben Meshulam, Mishum of Yochanan Achiv, Sha'amar Mishum of Elazar ben Chisma. Ein osin chalas Amma Aretz V'Tara. You are not allowed to help this person. Again, a friend comes over to you with a thing of dough. Are you allowed to separate the challah for him? The answer is no. Why not? Like, what would be the issue with helping this guy out? So the concern is, again, this guy very likely he's not careful with Tumah V'Tara. The challah, the dough, I should say, might be tameh. Now, if this guy goes over to a Kohen and says, "Here is challah," the Kohen might realize that it very well might be tameh, and therefore he's not going to use it. But if the guy comes over to the Kohen and says, "Don't worry, Yigal helped me with separating challah," then the guy might be like, "Well, Yigal wouldn't have helped him if it was tameh." So he might give more credence to the point that and therefore the Kohen might eat it, not realizing that Yigal only helped him separate the challah, but it still might be tameh. That's our concern, and therefore we say, don't help this guy. Aval, but this is still the member. Aval osin isas chulia v'tara v'notal himena kedei chalo minicha bekfisho oba anfusa ukshaba am aretz litol notel eshen be'eno choshesh. So what can you do? Let's say the same guy comes over to you not with dough but with kernels of wheat, and he's basically coming to you and he's saying the kernels of wheat clearly are tahar. They were never in a state that they could have been hukshar lekabel tumah. So we know that we're dealing with produce that right now is tahar. And he asks for your assistance in going through the process of, processing the stuff and the kernels and making the dough. Can you help him with that? Now you know the dough, once it's finished, is going to be tahar. Can you help him with that? And then you'll separate the challah. You'll take the challah, you'll put it in a special kli. The Gemara calls this kli fisha or an anchusa. Art Scroll helpfully translates these as Fisha and Anchusa, but Rashi and the Art Scroll, they say that what this is clearly some sort of kli, that there's some sort of pepper, so that you know that it's something, and it also can't be makabel toma, which is really because they're not makabel toma. So that's kind of what's going on here. So you can help him. There's some. I think it's like a flask of some sort, but I don't know exactly. I think it's some sort of leather flask or something. Either way, it's not makabel toma. It's something that's a little bit different, and the point is you can help him take his kernels, make them dough. You can then separate the challah. You put it in this specific kli, and then you can give the Amma Aretz, the two kalim back. And we're not worried that somehow he's going to make this challah tameh. He can then go to the Kohen and give the challah to the Kohen. So that you can do. We're going to have a second case, which is very, very similar. But instead of dealing with dough and challah, we're going to be dealing with olives and truma. So again, the ein osin truma zesa b'tara. If the guy comes over to you, I don't know anything about olives, but I guess there's a certain state where the olives are being close to being pressed, where they were already in a state where they could have been makabel toma. So if a guy comes over, an Amaretz comes over to you and he says, "Can you help me separate truma from these olives that may already be susceptible to tuma?" You have to say no. Again, for the same concern, you don't want this guy going to a Kohen and the Kohen having a false sense of security, knowing that someone from this year helped him take off the truma. Aval, but what you can do is osin zaysim chulya betara. And again, what you can do is if a guy has olives that are in a certain state where they could not have been mekabel tuma yet, whatever that means, you can help him through the pressing process to then get them to a state where they are, subject. You know that they were tahar because you've kind of been handling them from the get-go. You can then separate the truma. You would put the truma, whether it's the oil or the olives, whatever exactly it is, you can put them in one of, it says a kli of the chaver. The Gemara is going to ask what exactly this means. You can put them in one of the kalim and then give it back to the Amaretz, and he will take that again to the Kohen. But the Gemara is bothered by this. This is one long memra. And again, just to recap, what the memra essentially said, if the Amaretz has produce, whether it's grain, whether it's challah, whether it's olives, that are already susceptible to tumah, you can't help him. At that point, it's too late. If he comes to you earlier in the process, you can help him process the grain into dough and then help him separate the challah. Or you can take the olives, help him, whatever the pressing olive process is, and then you can help him separate the truma. But the Gemara is still bothered. Bottom line, you're giving challah, you're giving truma to an amaretz to give to a kohen. Why is that okay? Why are we not concerned that the guy is going to be mitameh the challah or the truma? So the time am I? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, we do allow you to do this. Mishum kedei chayav tegabel u'mishum kedei chayav debadan. Whoever this amaretz is asking to help, this is his parnasa. He helps people process grain, and we want him to have the parnasa. So we say we know we're taking a risk. We're giving challah back to an amaretz, but we're willing to take that risk to help in the parnasa of the gabel or this badad, which is a gabel is someone who makes dough and a badad is someone who processes olives. Utricha, and I need to teach the halacha in both the case of the dough and the case of the olives. Yashminan gabel, if I only had the case of the dough, mishun delo nafish agri, I would think we need to be very sensitive to that guy's parnasa because the baker or whatever the gabel, however you define that, he just doesn't make a lot of money. So therefore, wherever you can get business, we want to encourage people to use it. We want to give them the business. Aval badad, but a guy who runs the olive press, that is, I guess, much more lucrative. So nafish agre malo. So maybe we're not as concerned. And if I only had the case of a badad, mishum delo shchia. Granted, it's a high margin job, but it's seasonal, right? People only press olives in certain seasons. Again, I'm learning this for the first time. I don't know this olive seasons. Aval gabal, but the person who's a gabal, the shchiach, granted, there's lower margin, but at least it's year round. So emalo trich, and therefore I wanted to teach this halacha twice. Bottom line, again, the Gemara is going to chazar the halacha. Amar mar. If he comes early enough in the process, what do? No tel hemena kadei challah. You can separate. You can prepare the dough. You can separate the challah. Umeinicha bechafisha uba anchusa. You put it in this flask of some sort that's not mekabel tumah. Ukshaba amaretz litol. And when the amaretz comes to take back his kalim notel hashtam, he can take back his dough and the challah that's in this chvisha, ve'eno choshesh. The leichosh dilma nagaba. So the Gemara asks, I don't even understand. I understand now. You told me why we're even allowed to do this because we're concerned for the parnasa of the gabel. But bottom line, why are you giving this amaretz this flask of challah? Maybe he'll touch it. Maybe he'll open it. All right, he doesn't know. So Jamrina lay. We tell him, by the way, you should know, if you open the flask and you're matame, the dough, the challah, everything is going to go back to being tevel. So you're going to be in a whole bad situation and it's not going to be good. The Mefarshim actually speak out whether this is actually true. Like, does it actually make everything tevel or do you just tame your challah? Either way, maybe we're scaring him, maybe it's true, I don't know. But the point is, that's what we tell him. But the Gemara says, all right, the guy's an Amar, right? So the bottom line is, fine, it'll become tevel. The guy's an Amar, he's not anyway, normally, he doesn't care for these things. So why is that going to restrain him? But the Gemara says, what are you talking about? He's coming over to you, he wants your help in doing challah, right? Clearly, for whatever reason, right now, he's concerned, whatever the reason is. So he's not going to now touch it and mess up his stuff. Okay, so Amar Mar, similar halacha when it comes to the olives. So we're about halfway down. Second words on the line are Amar Mar. So Notel Hemena Kedei Truma. You can help him press his olives, and then you separate the truma. Umeinicha, this time not in the chvisha, but in the kela of shalchavar. You put it in your own kalim. Ukshaba amaretz. We told him when the amaretz comes to take back his olives and oil or whatever he's taking. Notel es shtehen. He takes both of the kalim. Be'eno choshesh. So now the Gemara asks again. V'leichosh, meaning v'neichosh dilma nagava. Maybe the amaretz is going to now touch the oil or the olives that are sitting in this kli of the chaver. Bishlama hasan bishlama by the dough isle hakera. We had this weird kli, right? But hachamaya kera isle. But by the case of the olives, you didn't tell us that we're putting it in any special kli. We're just putting it in the chaver's kli. But what does that do? So the Gemara says the manachle bekli glalim kli avanim and kli adam. And this is really what Eddie was getting at. But we're that no. It's not only that we put it in the chaver's kalim, we're putting it in specific kalim, whether it's glalim, whether it's stone, whether it's pottery. It's stuff that can't be makabel tuma. That's really the point, that we're putting it in a specific kli that can't be makabel tuma. The Gemara says, Yihachi, my area the chaver. Afilu da amar etzami. So why did the Gemara make a big deal of putting it in the chaver's kalim? If what you're telling me is they're putting it in kalim that are not makabel tuma, it could even be the amar's kalim. Why do we care who's kalim? The Gemara says, Hachanami, and Hachanami, you're right. Ka'amar. Kalim shel amaretz haruin lishamish ben chaver. It could even be the amaretz's kalim, but the point is that it's kalim that the chaver would see and say, okay, I'm comfortable putting it in these kalim because these are kalim that are not makabel tuma, and therefore I can give it back to you. And as long as I'm confident you're not going to like open and touch the contents, we're going to be okay. So the very last halacha of the Mishnah, again, the Darkei Shalom, these were the very last takanas, was that you can be machzik idei aku mishvis. And the way Rashi explained what this line meant was he said, Hashta mashma misayin mamash. Sounds like you literally help a guy on Shvius work his fields. And that was, obviously very troubling to the Gemara. The Gemara says, Machzikin, you can help a guy on Shvius. You certainly can't help, meaning he can do whatever he wants, on Shvius, but you can't help him during Shemitah. Not only that, this is the second halacha, the ein koflin shalom la'obei kofamim. Even though maybe you're allowed to say shalom aleichem, but you can't overdo it. You can't give him an enthusiastic shalom, a double lashon of shalom. But we're focusing really more on the first halacha. You're not allowed to help him on Shemitah. So what is our Mishnah talking about? Gemara says lo tricha lememra lahu achzuka ba'alma. You're not helping him. You're encouraging him. You're walking by his field. You see your neighbor working his field on Shemitah. You're saying, "Wow, crops look great. You're doing a great job." You're not literally helping him. You just the Mishnah is saying you're allowed to encourage even your Gaish neighbors. Livnei Darkei Shalom. Yihad Rav Yehuda Amar Lahu Achzuku. Rav Yehuda would say to his Gaish neighbors on Shemitah Achzuku, and Rav Sheshes Amar Lahu Ashrastam. This is also Rashi says a certain lashon of encouragement. The ein koflin shalom l'ovei kochavim. So once we brought in that memra, the second thing that they said was you can't overdo your shalom aleichem to your Gaish neighbors. Rav Chizda makdim v'yayiv lehu shama. Rav Chizda was always careful. If someone says to you, good morning, so you're probably going to respond a little bit more enthusiastically. So Rav Chizda was always careful because of this halacha to be the first one to say shalom aleichem. So he'll say shalom, and maybe the guy will respond with a double shalom, but that way you're not the person responding with the over-enthusiastic hello. Rav Kahana, he had a different halacha on how to get around this. He would say shaloma lamar. He would say shalom, shalom to Mar. And in his mind, Rashi said Mar meant his Rebbe. So he's talking to the guy and he's saying, oh, shalom Mar, but he means like not you, like shalom to my Rebbe. That was his way of kind of getting around this halacha. Okay. B'shoel and B'shloman, the very last halacha of our Mishnah was that not only can you encourage them on Shemitah, but you can say, again, you can say good morning, you can greet them. Mm-hmm. So the Gemara says, Hasha achzuke machsakinon. If you're telling me that you can walk on Shemitah while they're working and say, wow, your crops look great, of course you can say good morning. Like, what is this teaching me? So Amar, Rabbi Yeva, lo nitzrucha el yom chagam. You're right. On a regular Monday, for sure. But the chiddush over here is that even on their pagan holidays, you're still allowed to say shalom aleichem. Why would you think not? These are, we say goyim nowadays, but we're talking about avodos kochavim. We're talking about people that are pagan, they worship avodah zarah, and you might have a havamina that on their day, whatever that is, when they go into their shuls and they're davening to their God, anything that good that happens on that day, they might attribute to the prayers they said that morning. So if they walk out of shul and they see you and you give them a big smile and a big hello, they can say like, "Wow, I knew this was going to be a good day." because Josh Ross, I haven't seen him in forever, and he's giving me a big smile, right? So you would think that it's true, he does. He doesn't normally give a big smile, right? So you would think, right? So maybe that's on some level you're being nichshol. This guy in his avodos kochavim, which again is one of the Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach, you shouldn't do that. So therefore, specifically on their day where they're going to daven, you should not be overly friendly with them. And Tanya, we actually see this in a brayso. Lo yikanes adam leveso shlo v'kochavim b'yom chago. If it's his, day of chag, you shouldn't walk into his house. V'yitain lo shalom. But matzah b'shuk. But if you do happen to bump into him in the shuk, no saying lo, you can say shalom, but b'safa rafa v'koved rosh, but a little toned down. You don't want to overdo it again to give them reason to thank their God. Rav Huna, Rav Chizda. This is how our parak will conclude with another encounter with our favorite character, Geniva. Right. This is the third time now in Gittin where this Geniva character will show us. So Rav Huna, Rav Chizda, Havu Yasvi, they were sitting, and Chalef Azal Geniva, and all of a sudden Geniva comes over. So who's Geniva? Geniva was this person who was a big Talmud Chacham, but he also loved to fight, and he was a big Baal Machlokas. And we saw earlier in the Masechta, he would specifically start up with Mar Okva, who was the Reish Galusa. He ended up in prison. He ended up, he ended up on death row. So I was looking into this a little bit yesterday. From the fact that these stories are after that story, it sounds like he made his way out of death row somehow. But either way, this is this person, Geniva, who for some reason shows up and gets in a number of times. He's walking down, and now Rav Chizda and Rav Huna are sitting, and one of them says to the other, Amar lechad lechavre, nekom mikmei tvar uryanhu. Geniva's coming to us, we should really stand up out of covet. He's a real Talmud Chacham. And Amar lo, the other one said, umikmei palga nekom. This guy's a Baal Machlokas. We should get up for a Baal Machlokas. So they're debating whether they should give this guy covet or they should not give this guy covet. Either way, Arahachi, Asa, but Geniva shows up. So I don't know what they did, but he comes. Arahacha, Asa, Ihu Legabayu, and Amar Lahu, and Geniva says to Reb Huna and Reb Chizda, Shlama Alaychu Malki, Shlama Alaychu Malki. He says 2 times, Shalom Aleichem, kings. Amru Lez, they said to him, Minalan Rabbanan Ikru Malachim. How do you know that, granted, we're coming to Amr Rabbanan. Why are you greeting us this way? Why are you greeting us like kings? Amar Lahu, Dechsiv is the pasuk in Mishlei, Bi Malachim Yimlochu. The pasuk is referencing B, is reference to Torah, and it says those who learn Torah should rule, right? So it's a reference that Talmidei Chachamim can be called kings. Amru Lei, so they said to him, Uminalan Dekaflinan Shlama Lamalti. So when you're speaking to a king, how do you know you're supposed to double up the Shalom Aleichem Malka, Shalom Aleichem Malka? Amar Lahu. So he said, this is how I know. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Minayin Shakoflin Shalom Lamelech Shenemar. And this is a pasuk from Divrei Hayamim that might be more familiar to you if you say V'yitan Lecha. So those of Kins Main, but not necessarily Kins North. The pasuk says, Baruach Lavshas Amasai Rosh Hashalishim V'gomer. But all the work is being done in the V'gomer. So if you read the pasuk, it says Baruch Lavshas Amasai Rosh Hashalishim. Lecha David v'imcha ben Yishai Shalom Shalom lecha v'Shalom le'azrecha. So when this Amasai was talking to David HaMelech, he would use a double lashon of Shalom, and that was Geniva's raya. That when you're speaking to a king, you use this double lashon of Shalom. Our scroll I saw actually points out that if you think back to the Bar Kamsa story, when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai gets out of the gates and he meets Vespasian, what does he say? Shlomo Aleichem Malka, Shlomo Aleichem Malka. And that's when he said, oh, you're Chayav Misa twice. But we see that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when speaking to a king, or what was going to be a king, he did in fact do this, use this double lashon of Shalom. So Amri Lei, so I guess they were impressed, because they said, Litzo Mar Midi, do you want to, in the middle of eating, do you want to eat with us? Amar Lahu, Geniva answered, Hachi Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Asher Lola Adam Shiitom Klum, I can't eat because I need to feed my animals first. Shenemar, pasuk that we say every day. And so first you got to feed your animals, and then you feed yourself. Mazel tov. Adran Allah. All right. So we're going to pick up the next parak. The next parak picks off very much where we left off prior to the digression. So prior to the digression, we were learning halachas about shlichus by a get, and that's very much where we pick up. So again, a man can make a shliach lahalacha to his wife. He can appoint a shliach to give a get to his wife. His wife can appoint a shliach lekabala to accept the get. So ha'omer, this is the man talking. Ha'omer hiskabel getzel ishti. A man says to a shliach, hiskabel getzel ishti. Now clearly he cannot create a shliach lekabbalah. So what he's saying is he's trying to make a shliach laholacha. He's just using the wrong lashon. Oh, or the husband says holech getzel ishti. Now he's using the right lashon. He's saying make a shliach laholacha. Imratza lachzar yachzar. This was the very first, right? This is the takana that Rabbi Gamliel made, right? If he wants to be choser, he can be choser. How are you choser? So again, that was the machlokas, right? You got to, Rabbi Gamliel said, you got to track the shliach down. You can't just set up a bezdin. But the point is, if you make a shliach laholacha, you are allowed to be choser so long as it doesn't get to the woman's hand. But if a woman makes a shliach lekabbalah, so imratza lachzar lo yachzar. Once it gets to the shliach's hands, then it's too late, right? Then it's shliach shaladam kamoso. This shliach lekabbalah is just like the woman. Once the get gets to the shliach's hands, game over. Lefikach. Therefore, im amar lo habal. Let's say the baal is talking to the shliach lekabbalah. So a woman appointed a shliach lekabbalah. The baal is now has the get and he's giving it to the shliach lekabbalah. He says to the shliach lekabbalah, "Efshi to the kabbalah. I don't want you to be a shliach lekabbalah. Ella holech v'tein la. I actually want you to be my shliach leholacha." Now I don't even, the Gemara is going to get into why is he even allowed to do this. But the point is, let's assume he does that. He can do that, and therefore imratza lachzar yachzar. Then, if he wants to retract, he has transformed the shliach lekabbalah into a shliach leholacha, and now already he can retract until the shliach, gets to the woman's hands. Rav Shimon Gamliel omer afa omeres toli giti. The woman also uses the wrong lashon. Instead of saying iskabeli, she says toli. So take for me this get. And ratza lachzar lo yachzar. And again, we'll see what Rav Shimon Gamliel. That's not going to be today's daf, so we'll leave that for Yoel later this week. But the bottom line is the basic Mishnah, the basic halacha in the Mishnah was that a man can create a shliach laholacha. But so long as the get doesn't get to her hand, whether it's literally her or her shliach, he can be choser. A woman can make a shliach lekabbalah, but once the get gets to the shliach lekabbalah's hands, you can no longer be choser. And the Gemara is going to now address an issue that it's brought up a number of times in this Masechta, which is holech kizechidami or holech lav kizechidami. So just a chazer for a second, right? If a person wants to give a matana to someone else and he wants to appoint a shliach, right? There's a concept of zachan la'adam. So in theory, once I give the matana to the shliach, he was zoched on behalf of, assuming it's a matana, it's good for the makabel matana. In theory, right, zachan la'adam shelo b'fanav. But that's dafka b'makom she'ein chav la'acher. That's only if no one else is at a loss. Well, here, if I'm giving a gift, I'm at a loss, right? Because I'm about to lose money. So I need to be okay with it. If I make it very clear that I am okay with it, if I say, please be zoched, this object, for Eddie, then I can't be choser because zachan la'adam shelo b'fanav. What if I say very specifically, take this matana over to him, deliver it to him, so then I was very clear, I want to have the right to be choser, right? I'm not saying don't be zochen it for him, just deliver it. What if I use the language of holech? This is like very nidarim, like the language of holech itself. Is holech kizechi? And if I say holech mana laploni, can I no longer retract? Or is holech lav kizechi? It's something that we've had machlokas Rav Shmuel, we've had a machlokas, I think it was Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish. The point is, what is the language of holech? What does that mean? In the context of a get, it's all the more complicated because a get is not a schus for the woman. It's a chov for the woman. So clearly, if I just say, take this get to the wife, I can definitely be choser because again, it's not a schus for the wife, it's a chov. And that's really the halakha, that's how Rashi, right in the beginning of the Mishnah, Rashi says, this is working through the concept of zachan la'adam shelo b'fanav, and therefore, because this is not a schus, that's why I can be choser. But what if the woman makes a shliach lekabbalah? So the woman says, for me, this is clearly a schus. I'm making a shliach lekabbalah. I want to get this get. Okay, so now we've removed the issue of, chavin la'adam ela b'fanav or whatever it is. So now we're back to our regular question. If a man says holech to a shliach lekabbalah, is holech kizechi dami, and therefore I can no longer be choser, or is holech lav kizechi dami, and I can be choser? And holech just meant deliver it, but don't be zocha in it on behalf of my wife. That's
but then he's changing a shaliach l'kabbalah into a shaliach.
No. Meaning, we know for certain the wife wants the get. So the get is a schus. It's just like a matana. The get is a schus. The question is now, when I say to my shliach, holech, what does holech mean? Does holech mean be zocha in it? Or does holech mean just deliver? That's going to be the question. So Amalei Rav Acha Berei, we're starting the Gemara. Amalei Rav Acha Berei Derav Avia L'Rav Ashi. And he's trying to be medayik from our Mishnah to be poshet this shaila. He said, if you look at the second example in our Mishnah, right? We said Ha'omer Eskabel gets elishti. Oh, Holech gets elishti. That was the lashon that was used. Holech gets elishti. And we said that the man can be choser. Why can he be choser? So Amalei Rav Acha Berei Derav Avia L'Rav Ashi. Taima. The only reason that this man can be choser is because she did not appoint a shliach, and again, therefore, we don't know that it's a schus for the woman, and therefore you can be choser. But let's say the wife appointed a shliach l'kabbalah, and therefore we know this get is a schus for the wife. So then, what's a lachzar? Lo yachzar. So then, when a man says holer get zel ishti, he cannot be choser. Shmami na holech is a chidami. So therefore, we should be able to learn that this lashon of holech, when we know the item itself is a schus, because she made a shliach l'kabbalah, holech is kizchidami, and this can answer our age-old question of is holech kizchidami or is holech lav kizchidami. But the Gemara says it's not muchach that way. Why? Lo la'olam emalacha holech lav kizchidami. Really, I'll tell you, holech is lav kizchidami. But so what's the chiddush then in our Mishnah? Right, the Gemara, there's almost this like unspoken thing where if that wasn't the chiddush in our Mishnah, then there really is no chiddush in our Mishnah, because we've learned already in this Masechta that when I appoint a shliach la'olacha, I can be choser. Right. The only question is how can I do it? But clearly I can be choser. So if that's not the chiddush in our Mishnah, what is the chiddush in our Mishnah? So the Mishnah says, no, I'll tell you, holech is lav k'skidami. It was not a good deal, but this kabel get li'ishti etzrichle. The chiddush of our Mishnah was the very first case when the man uses the wrong lashon. When the man said his kabel get li'ishti, does that work or does that not work? I would have had a havamina that hoel ubal lav bar shavi shliach l'kabbalah. Since the husband can never make a shliach l'kabbalah, so then afagav demata get liyada lo havikita. I would have had a havamina that if a man says his kabel get zeh li'ishti, even if the man brings it to the woman, it just doesn't work. I can't make a shliach l'kabbalah, right? So whatever I did has no legal significance, and therefore it just doesn't work. Kamash malan the hiskabel v'holech kamar. That what the man's really saying is he's saying hiskabel, but what he means is holech. But the bottom line is, as far as our question, is holech kitzchi or is holech lav kitzchi, you don't have a raya from our mission. So again, it's a little complicated because so much of this is like not really spoken in the Gemara. You kind of have to. That's why you have these like long Rashis on the side. Either way, the Gemara is going to try round two. Tanan, in the next case of the Mishnah, Isha sha'amrei skabel legiti. The woman says to her shliach, she appoints a shliach l'kabbalah. Imrata lachzer lo yachzer. So at this point, once the get gets the shliach l'kabbalah's hand, the husband can no longer be choser. My lav. The Gemara is assuming right now that this is all one long story. My lav loshna akabbalah loshna ahalacha. And the Gemara is saying, wouldn't this be true if the husband said to his shliach, hiskabeli giti or holech ishti, right? And again, we're going to see that once the woman appoints a shliach l'kabbalah, and this man says holech get zeh, he can no longer be choser. Kamash malan that holech is kizachi, but the Gemara says again, no, it's not muchach. Maybe I'll tell you this halach is only true akabbalah. So again, if the man says to his shliach, his gabel gets eli ishti, that already we're comfortable saying that's a lashon of bizocha, this get on behalf of my wife. So if a man said his gabel gets eli ishti, once we know that it worked and the woman made a shliach l'kabbalah, so clearly at that point he can't be closer. The question is, what about holech?
When the get goes to the shliach of the woman, that's when it is over.
Exactly, that's when it's over.
Just that transformation.
Exactly. So the question is, right, the Gemara wanted to say that the halacha would be the same whether the man said holech or hiskabel, but the Gemara says no, it's not muchach. Again, maybe I'll tell you that the halacha that you can't be choser is dafka where you said hiskabel, right? The Gemara says lo akabala. It's dafka on kabbalah, not on holech. So the Gemara is going to try a third time. Tashma, what about the next case of the Mishnah? The next case of the Mishnah was lefika im amar lo habal. If the husband said to the, so this is the case where the woman appointed a shliach lakabala, right? The man is now has the get. He didn't appoint any shliach, but he says to shliach lakabala, I don't want you to be a shliach lakabala. In fact, I want you to be my shliach lahalacha. That works. So the Gemara says maybe we can bring a raya from this case, right? Tashma lefikach im amar lo habal. If the Baal says to this shliach, e efshi shetekabala ela holech v'tein, and when he does that imratza lachzer, he is allowed to be choser. Imratza lachzer yachzer. So the Gemara says taima de amar e efshi. The only reason why he's allowed to be choser is because he said, he had this whole arichos of efshi. I don't want you to do, whatever. But hello amar. If he doesn't say efshi, so then imratza lachzer lo yachzer and shmamina holech kizchidami. So again, let's look at what this man said. He said efshi shet the kabbalah ela holech. He said, I don't want you to be a shliach lakabbalah. I only want you to holech. If holech was lav kasli, he wouldn't need this whole preamble. He could have just said holech, because holech is lav kasli. From the fact that he needed the whole preamble, from the fact that he needed to say efshi with your shliach lakabbalah rather holech, that's mashma that just by saying holech alone wouldn't be enough. And holech, therefore, is kizchi. Does that make sense?
He's just, there's no benefit. He's divorcing her anyway. He's just making the shliach go all the way instead of.
Well, he's also giving himself some time to debate whether he wants to do it or not.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the point is, the Gemara is bringing a raya, right? If holech was lav kisli, then all the husband needed to say to this guy was holech. From the fact that he's saying efshish at the kabel rather holech, it's mashma that holech is kizchidami. But the Gemara again is going to say dilma behelach. No, again we can push off this raya. We can just change the lashon of the Mishnah to say that case he didn't say holech, he said halach. And again, halach would be much clearer. That you mean to be. You mean to tell that your shliach to be zocha, and again, we're just kind of a little dochik perhaps, but we're just changing the lashon of the Mishnah, and therefore it's no longer a raya. Okay, moving along. The Gemara says like this: Pshita. One thing we know for certain: ish habishliach laholacha. A man can be a shliach laholacha. Shekein baal molech elishto. A husband can give a get to his wife. He can also appoint a male to be the shliach laholacha. Isha have a shliach lakabala. An isha can be a shliach lakabala. Shkein isha makabala gets a miyad baila, because the woman herself can accept the get from her baal. So clearly, she can appoint a woman to be a shliach lakabala. Ish lakabala the isha leholachamai. Can a man be a shliach lakabala, and can a woman be a shliach leholacha? Yes or no? So the Gemara says Tashma Omer eskabel get zelishti. A man says to his shliach, accept this get for my wife. Oh, holech get zelishti. Or bring a get to my wife. Imratza lachzer, yachzer, then he can be choser. So ha'isha sha'amra eskabel li gitzi, and a woman who says she appoints a shliach lakabala, imratza lachzer lo yachzer. The Gemara says, the Gemara makes a wild pavamim. My la b'chad shliach. Right? Aren't we talking about the same person in this entire story? Meaning the same person that the man created as a shliach laholacha, the woman created as a shliach lakabala, ushma mina kasher lakabala and kasher laholacha, and clearly the same person. He just got instructions to be a shliach laholacha and to be a shliach lakabala. So clearly, whether it's a man or a woman, I don't know, but clearly one person can do both. The thing Gemara says like mehechatesi, right? Like lo, this is two different stories. A man's talking to his person, and the woman's talking to her person. So what type of? All right, so tashma, but then we bring the next case where it's clearer that we are dealing with the same person. Tashma lefika im amar lo habal yeshish the kabbalah ela holech v'tein la imratza lachzar yachzar. Again, what was that case? A woman made a shliach lakabala. Shliach lakabala now comes to the husband and he says, "Don't be the shliach lakabala. I want you to be my shliach lakabala." Here it's clear we are dealing with one person, and the same person can be a shliach lakabala for the girl and a shliach laholacha for the baal. The Gemara says, "V'ha'acha dechad shliachu u'shma mina kasher l'kabbalah kasher lo halacha." So checkmate. Clearly, a person can do both. But the Gemara says you haven't actually answered the question fully. Meaning, yes, you're right. I know that maybe it's a man or maybe it's a woman can do both. I don't know that a man can do both and a woman can do both. So the Gemara says, "Show mina." I can learn from that line of the Mishnah. If I only know one, maybe I'll learn the lesser chiddush that ish. Maybe I can learn that a man can be a shliach la'olam. Why would I assume it that way as opposed to the other way? Shekain av mekabel get lebitzo ketana. We have precedent for a man being a shliach l'kabbalah when a man can accept a get for his bito ketana. But isha lo'olacha tebayalach. But still, we should not. We still have an open question whether an isha can be a shliach l'holacha. So Amarav Mari, we can be posed to the shaila from Mishnayos that we had earlier in the Masechta, and even in Tashma. This is earlier in our Masechta. Ap hanashim ve'ein ne'emanos lomer meis baila ne'emanos lavies kid. So there's 5 women that have reason to dislike a girl, right? Her sister-in-laws, her daughter-in-laws, her mother-in-laws, whatever it is. So they don't have ne'emanos to say that the man died. They still do have ne'emanos to bring over a get in Medina Sayyam, so long as they say b'fanai nechta, right? B'chasam holacha, clearly they are shliach leholacha. They're bringing a get from Medina Sayyam, so clearly they are women, and they could be shliach leholachas. Amar Ravashi, mi seifa na mishnah mina. I actually go in the same halacha from the seifa of that mishnah, the Tani seifa ha'isha atzma. Not only these 5 women, but the wife herself has the ability. Mebia es gata. She can be a shliach leholacha for her own get. And again, the Gemara had the Gemara was wondering what this case even is. Why does she even need to say B'fanei nechtav? Isn't she already divorced if she has to get? And the Gemara said it's because she's a shliach leholacha. And we'll just end here a few lines from.
Thank you.